Okay, good evening, viewers. You are joining us here on the platform for the first time, first episode. This is a program that is brought to you by OSISA and PAGS. The program is meant to enlighten the women's discussions among the various issues that happen in society, as well as how our country is and where it's going, and how we are going to increase our women's participation. The issues will be covering different women. As we can see today, I'm already joined by one. An interesting conversation we are going to have. Like I've said, I'm joined by two powerful women, one who will join us as we continue. My name is Mumbi Namwawa, and I'll be your host on this program. Just to get into the conversation, today's topic is a very big question that has been asked since Zambia gained its independence in 1964. And we're still asking the question from 1964 to now. And the question is, how is the current government atmosphere for women and the youth participation? To give a brief background, we are all aware that women have become a very big part of our society, and they have always been. We have seen a consistent trend of how women have been left out of participation in governance issues. And this is just not a Zambian problem, but a global problem. We have seen some countries form legislations which help to increase the number of women in representation, both in parliament and at local levels. Among these countries are Rwanda, and we're still learning from Cameroon. We've also seen socialist states such as Cuba and Bolivia also take up such steps. This has come with a positive response from women, and it has also increased the number of women in decision-making positions. We are still looking at Zambia, which had its first female minister after 33 years of independence, and up to now we still have the conversation of seeing women being increased, of seeing women have an increase in their participation on governance issues. So to join me on this discussion today, I have Natasha, um, a young person who who will pretty much cover her introduction. But we have seen her talk about who supports the increase of women participation in governance, and she means it at all levels. Another one who will be joining us is Christine Musolo, the Socialist Party candidate for Mongo Central. Natasha, good evening.
Good evening, Mumbi. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I am good, thanks. Just tired from the day, but I'm good to have the conversation.
I can see. Okay, Natasha. So to just get the conversation started, like I have said, our conversation today is about looking at the current environment for women's participation in government. We can't hide from the fact that it's an issue that we've been complaining about for years. And as a country, seeing that we're also a signatory uh, to, 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 to to documents such as the Vision 2030 that talks about an increase of women participation. Uh, what is the general overview of the environment right now for women's participation in governance?
Well, my general overview of women's participation in governance is that, in as much as the talks have been going on for over a century now, or close to a century, the numbers are still low, and the environment is not favorable for women to participate in governance issues. And so now, then it begs the question of moving the conversation from just having numbers, as with regards to women being in governance, but then now start to talk about what exactly is limiting the women from participating or increasing their numbers in issues of governance. So the environment is very unfavorable, judging from the numbers that we have of women taking part in governance issues. I can't hear you. I can't get anything.
Okay, oh sorry. So I was saying, I see that you're a person who's been advocating for women's inclusion in governance. I think to say the word is unfavorable is quite general. I would love to hear from you. What is making the conversation and the environment of women participation become unfavorable?
Okay. So the conversation of the environment being unfavorable for me starts not only at national level, but it's something that we experience in our households at a domestic level. And so we have certain tendencies or certain roles or certain discriminatory tendencies that inhibit women from participating at democracy at household level, which then translates into society and then at national level itself. And so, for example, in a household, I come from a female led household, and I happen to be the only girl and the last born in a family of three. And so you find that mom tends to give me certain roles in the house that I should spearhead. But then when the conversation happens outside the house, people will ask the question to say, why Natasha and why not the other guys that are in the house? And so it's not a question of whether I am capable of taking up that role, but rather because I am a female, I cannot take up certain roles in the household level. So the conversation starts from household level. And then if you have these tendencies at a domestic level, then there is no way under the sun it's going to be any different at national level. These same people that exist in the households make up society, and in turn are the people that decide issues or around the environment at national level itself.
Could it be fair to say that perhaps the reason why we are not seeing a lot of women participating right now, and why the environment right now is not conducive for women's participation, it's borders around our societies and how we generally uh, have the conversation of leadership at household levels?
Well, yeah, like I said earlier, it all starts from household level. So if certain gender roles will make one gender appear to be inferior than the other, then yeah, the conversation starts from household level. And so our leadership conversations at the household level is what to translate at the national level. So, for
Um,
example, mm, at a household level, or for example, somebody dies in a family and they are picking out an administrator. Usually, the first thought to pick an administrator is usually the male. Rarely do we find that the woman is the one that's an administrator. So, already that has a lot to say about how society views women in leadership.
Okay, Natasha, I think to some extent, I would love to say, let's try to run away from the home setup. The home setup
Okay,
is influenced by many factors, and that comes to
okay.
how our parents were raised. You and me are a new generation who wants to raise our children differently, and we're advocating for something that is also a bit strange to our
Yeah,
parents. Um,
yeah.
Although we may agree that it's a big part of how we see women participate in in the issues of governance, uh, then what is happening at the national level as a country? How are we faring? Why are we still seeing women be left behind, even if we are signatory to commitments such as the Vision 2030 that talks about 50-50 representation of women and men at all levels of decision making? Where are we going wrong?
So we are talking about women getting into these leadership roles and taking part in governance. But then what we are not realizing is that these very women that we want to participate in governance, we are throwing them in an environment that mainly supports the men itself. So I want to give an example, a practical example. Here's a woman that's been elected to parliament, and then she has been appointed to be a minister. And so usually meetings happen at different and odd hours. Sometimes you find you're having a meeting, say 22 hours or 23 hours. It's okay. It's viewed as okay for women, for men to have a meeting at 22 hours and 23 hours. But then you're then taking a woman in this space, and the woman is supposed to be part of that meeting at 22 or 23 hours. So now the conversation again starts to say, maybe she's sleeping with this and this person. How come she's having a meeting with this person at this odd hour? And so women don't want to be associated with such kind of things. So yes, throw her in that space. It's an environment that supports men generally. And when she's in that space herself, she cannot survive. She cannot maneuver her way and be able to be effective. And so now they tend to withdraw and not participate at all.
All right. Just as a reminder, I'm sure you also had this experience. In our junior secondary uh, education, when we're doing civics, I think I can remember as far as primary, we would always list the reasons why we don't see women participate in governance, and among them were issues that had to do with how women are not economically empowered, how society already views women, and that is backed by tradition and many other factors. Would we still have to attach those to the home setup? Because I think those still do play a big role there, as much as the home setup may allow you to perhaps pursue this journey. We still find that the society is still not favorable. What did you say about those things?
So I didn't quite get your question clearly. Could you say it one more time? You were breaking in some point at some point.
Okay, so I'm saying when starting from primary to junior education, we know that the school curricula does list out a number of characteristics that have created the environment of women participation in government and favorable. And among them are seeing that women are usually less economically empowered. Women are usually stopped by the perception of society that is backed by our tradition, and many others. How do we get to tackle that conversation? Because I know that, yes, as much as it is important that the household level supports you, we still have other factors that are claimed to also be a hindrance of women's participation, in your words, become unfavorable. Do you agree to this, or how do you view these claims?
Okay. So yeah, women's economic status or socioeconomic status does play a huge role in how they tend to participate in governance issues. So women largely belong to the informal sector of the economy, and so they do not have the much disposable income that's needed to say take part in governance. And usually, when a woman makes money, her first instinct is to use the money to help at household level. Rarely does she ever want to use the money for her personal gain. And so now, um, additionally, because they belong to the informal sector, they do not have the much disposable income. Say, for example, I want to take part in an election as an MP. First off, I will need to have money for me to be able to be adopted, to apply for adoption within my party. And secondly, I will need to have money to run a campaign, which of course requires huge sums of money. And thirdly, I need to pay for my nomination fee. Currently, the nomination fee for female MPs, how much is it? 25, 20? Round up that. And so this is someone that belongs to an informal sector, and they need to raise roughly 20,000 just for them to pay for a nomination fee to the Electoral Commission of Zambia for them to be able to contest. So we find that women, because of their economic status, yes, tend to shun away from taking part in governance issues, and not just politics, but as well as in administrative work or in a place of work.
If then, Natasha, that is the case, we should start then talking about the issue of seeing that women are involved in these spaces. But for that to be able to be possible, we are talking about having an enabling environment, an atmosphere that is inclusive enough to see that women get there. Um, I would love you to share with us what then should we see to encourage women to be part of this environment.
So, the first thing for me is always perception. So, how women are perceived at household level or society has to change before anything else changes. There's no way we are going to expect change at national level if at our household level women are perceived as second class or inferior. So, firstly, perception needs to change at household level and society level. And then, secondly, the education aspect. So, usually, so for example, right now, for you to be able to contest as a member of parliament, you need to at least have a grade 12 certificate. And so when you look at the statistics, men are more educated than the females. So that already puts the women um, at a disadvantaged level. And then so now the question then comes in, or I mean, the solution that is required for this is more and more women need to be educated for them to be able to compete favorably with the men when it comes to opportunities. And then lastly, or thirdly, but not lastly, we need to, come up with certain laws and policies that help women get to the decision making table, and not only come up with these policies, but as well as have proper mechanisms and an implementation plan that's going to see to it that the women are actually benefiting from these policies and laws. So yeah, those three are my highlights.
Okay, Natasha. I want us to get some of the questions from our viewers that are watching us. There's this interesting comment that has been shared with us here, and the gentleman here, Malungu Watson, said something very interesting. So he says the problem we have is to do with the system. Until we overthrow the system, which makes women to feel inferior, let me thank the Socialist Party, which has a policy of 50-50 women representation, and they have been implementing, or they have implemented that policy of making sure women are adopted at parliamentarian level and local level. Comrade Musole, we salute you. Okay, Comrade Musole will be joining us. An interesting comment there. Um, I love this comment because in my preamble to this discussion, I did mention that we have seen some countries that have used the law to see that the environment becomes favorable for women to participate. Uh, what do you take of this comment? Should it take us to overthrow a system?
Yes, of course. Well, there's a systematic way in which women are discriminated or stopped from taking part in governance issues. So, in he's right when he says you will need to overthrow the system itself for women to be able to participate equally or actively in issues of governance. And then I love the fact that he commends the Socialist Party. Well, we've seen it. The Socialist Party has been for the last 2 3 months been sharing their adopted candidates, and
Yeah.
it's clear to see that they are actually adopting women to contest for these parliamentary seats. And Christine Musoli having been the first person to have been announced was an amazing thing. So yeah, we need to overthrow a system, and the Socialist Party is doing quite a good role in ensuring that women are adopted for elections.
Okay. Uh, but all in all, I think seeing that women are represented and seeing that the environment is fertile enough or accommodating enough for women becomes a two-part conversation. Away from, of course, the home setup and other obstacles that women face that are under the economic and social setup, I think we can also have the question to say, when it comes to the environment, there are still other things we see, and that includes things like violence, a trash for women, the cancel culture. What do we can we favor those because that's the current political environment that the country is beginning to experience?
Well, I'm so happy that you mentioned the issue of violence. So all the time there's a political event of late in Zambia. Usually you're going to hear there was bloodshed, even a common thing as a sad thing as having a party member pass on and you go for a funeral and you just see cadres all over fighting and there's bloodshed around and all that. Women do not love to associate themselves with violence. And so that's one of the reasons why they actually tend to shun away. Where there's violence, women don't love to be there. And so yeah. That's one of the major reasons why women do not participate in governance issues. And then I didn't quite catch the last part of your question because you were breaking. Could you mind repeating?
Oh yeah, I was saying, should we pardon those two, violence and cancel culture and gender shaming, because those are our current politics now.
No. We should not shun away from that. And also, when you mentioned the gender talk, I think women hate to be objectified, really. And so once they see that one woman that's up there has been objectified or they're being shamed, the rest of them will then shun away because they do not want to associate themselves with such talks. So yeah, no, we shouldn't shun away those two.
Okay, Natasha. How do then women get into this space? Because I'm aware that the topic of removing these, which are more common and which are more present to our eyes, and that is violence, cancel culture, and shaming, they are more in front of our eyes, and we can see that women are economically unstable or women are socially judged about getting into these positions. We have a new field that we can see even our politicians are embracing. We see when women try to comment, or any young person and the young person tries to comment, even if they wouldn't want to pick the side, they are told, you come on the political scene for you to, if you want to continue this conversation, come on the political scene. So how then do women get there? Because from the looks of things, this looks like something that is going to be embraced as it benefits certain people to maintain their power. How do women jump on this bandwagon?
So could you make your question a bit shorter because it's so long, you keep cutting and I am getting some parts and I'm going to get certain parts. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm saying currently our political environment is made up of violence, the cancel culture, and gender shaming. So, how then do women come into this space, well knowing that this is something that may be here to stay, especially that we're only 4 months away from the general election?
Your line is really breaking, Mumbi. I can't hear you.
Okay, let me just try to mute you. Yeah, so the question is, currently our political environment is embracing gender shaming, cancel culture, and violence. We are 4 months away from the general elections. How do we still encourage women to get on this bandwagon of being part of the leadership team, seeing that this trend is here to stay?
Well, some of the research that has been done suggests that the only it's gonna take roughly about 100 years or 107 years for us to achieve equality, especially in politics. And so every year for me is a step closer to closing the gap between now and the 107 years. And so women, regardless of what's going on, I think we cannot sort out this problem overnight or within a period of a year. But then there's obviously brave women out there that are willing to jump, regardless of the challenges that are being faced right now by the women, to jump on the line or to jump into the race and at least pave the way for the less motivated women or the less brave women to be able to participate as well in the coming years. So, regardless of the challenges that are being faced, somebody needs to take the first step, and those that are brave enough should go out there and create a way that or pave a way that is going to be favorable for the other women that are going to want to participate. I want to give a perfect example. So recently, when the PF had the convention, we saw a photo of Madam Sumaili, embracing Iris. For me, that was a happy photo. I don't care how everybody else feels about it, but for me, it told a story. So the women that are out there that have gone before us should be able to embrace the young women that are coming up and pave the way. And when we see such things happening, I'm sure more and more women are going to be encouraged to participate.
Okay, so you I would be more than glad to misquote you so that you correct me. Are we saying we then just leave the environment as it is, as long as we can see more women joining joining the team to leadership? I'm asking this question because this is a reality that women are living. I think we've seen a lot of very serious physical attacks. Not so long ago, did we see Lady Charmaine of the UPND be attacked, and she had very ish, I don't even know how I would explain such an act for someone to beat up a person to that extent, and that is a female. Good that you mentioned Iris. She's aspiring to take up leadership, and we can already see the clash that's coming for her. Even if we can still see men that still behave like us still have the positions. So do we just leave it as it is, as long as women are jumping there?
I'm glad you started by saying, can I misquote you? And so I will try and repeat a bit more clear. What
Yeah.
I'm saying is we should not continue to entertain what's going on. I'm not saying we should let the environment be and just jump in. But what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying is that regardless of the challenges that are being faced right now, those that are brave enough should be able to jump into the race and participate and then be able to create a favorable environment that those that are coming behind should be able to come and participate freely and in a less challenging environment. And so, for example, if let me give a practical example, if we decide to shun away and nobody participates, what then are we achieving? I mean, even when you go back to the years of colonial era and so on and so forth, the only way they were able to win is that they had to put up a fight. And so the brave women, like I said earlier, should be able to put up a fight and pave the way for those that are coming behind to be able to participate as well. So I'm not saying we leave the environment as it is, no, but then
Yeah.
again, we cannot just turn away and say we will not participate. We will not be achieving anything. So yeah, we might actually be phased out.
Okay. So, learning from a country like Rwanda, which is having the highest number of females in the world being represented in parliament and in governance structures, we have come to understand that they reached this point by making a law when they changed their constitution in 2003. But that wasn't enough. You will see that women came together and started advocating for other women as far as passing acts that would support for a more inclusive and protective measure for women candidates or any other woman that would want to take up other decision-making positions. Is that something that we see possible for a country like Zambia, which is even now we're still having debates about the constitution?
Okay, could you just repeat the last part because you were breaking? Just the last part when you mentioned the Constitution. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm saying, is it something possible that we can see for a country like Zambia? We're 4 months away from the elections, um, and we're still having confusion about our current constitution. Is it something that we can see here in Zambia, looking at the environment now?
So the case of Rwanda is very special, and
Mm-hmm.
their fight or their feminist fight actually started way 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 back.
Yeah.
And there's something interesting to note about countries like Rwanda and Liberia is that these are actually countries that suffered from war. And when they came out of war, they came out so great and were able to have so many women participate in governance. And then when you made a relation to Zambia to say, are we going to be able to see that, seeing that we're 4 months to the election? Well, I'm going to be honest with you, Mumbi. Come 2021, we will not have any serious change between what is going on now
Mm.
to to the next government that's going to be formed. And so it's not going to happen overnight. Like I said, it's going to take years and years for us to be able to achieve uh, what countries like Rwanda have achieved. And so, no, it's not going to be the same case for Zambia. We will not be at the same level as Rwanda. but we will get there. And the only way we will get there is to start now and start challenging the bad vices that we are seeing.
Okay.
I
So,
don't know if I have question
yeah,
favorably.
yeah, that's okay. So, Natasha, I'm going to give you two questions. I'll bring two questions on the screen. One is a comment. Okay, both are comments, but they're interesting because they set the trend of the conversation when it comes to women's participation. So, first one, I'll bring that comment from Muleta. And it says women must advocate for candidate protection from state security to ensure every woman contesting does not worry about cadre violence. And then there is this text one, an interesting one. Um, okay, sorry. There's a comment I'm looking for where one of the commenters said something interesting. Oh, there it is. So Ben says something interesting. Okay, I keep skipping it, but that these two comments, this comment in particular sets the trend of the conversation when we start talking about women and governance, whether we're talking about representation or we're talking about the environment. We will never find ourselves running away from this question. I'll leave this question open. What's your take?
And you of all people, Mumbi, should know that I am not a fan of this question. I do not even like it when it comes up in a conversation.
Yeah.
There is nowhere where it says that the men are in solidarity themselves.
Mm.
This conversation of women do not support each other, women do this and that, it's the same thing. Men don't support each other either, but they
Yeah.
don't talk about. So then, where is the fuss to always want to emphasize that women are not in solidarity or women do not support each other? Women do support it. I could count quite a number of women that have supported me in my ventures, and quite a number of men that have and have not supported me in my ventures. And then we also have men who will say fellow men have supported them, and fellow men have gone against them. And so this conversation about women lack solidarity, women do not uh, cooperate, or women don't like each other is, for me, it's just, a conversation that is used to actually keep women away from each other. So once a woman reads that comment, at the back of
Mhm.
her mind, what she knows is women do not support each other or women are not in solidarity. And she will go with it and she will entertain it. And all the time she sees a woman, it's we are not in solidarity with each other. We are here for a competition. So this doesn't exist really. It's just something that's perpetuated by society to try and keep women from working together. So no, I will cancel out that comment.
Okay. Earlier, I showed you a comment from Melitawa. He says women should come together and apply for security, for state security for all women candidates, especially this year, in order to ensure that we can be at least one step ahead when it comes to creating the environment. But while you're thinking of that, I want you to merge it with this interesting comment from Loretta. So she says part of the reason that most women refuse to take part in politics at national level is because most of these African governments' public commitments have not materialized into better protection for women and support for victims. And this has made women to play outside the political ground. I can give examples of many women that have been attacked, and the trend continues. Yet the law enforcement do lead to nothing to protect the women from harm. Also, women shouldn't feel entitled I think that should end meaning to be, I think, protected. uh, I would love you to give an answer that measures later suggestion for women to apply for security, but also taking into consideration of Loretta's comment.
Okay, so I love the comment by Muleta that says women should apply for security in the forthcoming elections, and I do agree with it. Largely because, like I had mentioned earlier in our conversation, women hate violence, and so where there's violence, women will not participate. And I do agree with him, and I hope it's something that can actually be taken up and something written down and submitted to whoever it's supposed to be submitted to, that women should receive a certain level of protection from the government itself during the forthcoming elections. And then adding Loretta's comment. So it was quite long. So I don't know which part exactly you want me to add. You want me to say women should talk about the part that says women should not feel entitled to be protected? Is that the part that
Mhm.
you want me to focus on?
I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I would love to misquote her and say yes. I'll be waiting for her to correct me in the
Oh,
comments. But it
let's
says
let's go with
women shouldn't be entitled. So let's put it in a case we misquote her.
having this conversation. The first, in the first place, why we're having this conversation is because women are disadvantaged more than the men are, and so now we're looking of ways to better the environment for them to be able to participate as equally as the men. But then, if you say women should not feel entitled to this protection, why then are we having this conversation? We might as well close the conversation and leave the environment to be as it is, and we participate in the environment that we are talking about right now. So no, women are not uh, feeling entitled. Women should be protected. So systems have been created to disadvantage the women, and so now the
Mm.
only way to take away those things is to protect the women. They're regarded as weaker in this conversation, and people that are weaker or people that uh, do not have capacity, of course, do require a certain level of protection. This is where the conversation of equity and equality comes in. So you help out those that are lacking more than those that are not lacking.
Okay, Natasha, I'll leave you with a question while I remind people of our program.
Okay.
It's interesting that we are talking about women having, or we are talking about the current environment of women's participation in governance, of course, without forgetting the youth. Bringing in all these suggestions that we feel would work in order for that particular environment that is accommodative is created. The question I'll leave you with is who should create the environment? While we are thinking about that, I welcome everybody on the show. This is the platform, a platform that opens up for women's discussion about the various issues of society, especially governance, seeing that we're heading towards 2021. Natasha, back to you.
Okay. So your question is who then should be in charge of making this environment favorable? My answer is everyone. And I will take a quote from Chimamanda Ngozi who says, so we cannot say we want to make the environment favorable for women and yet we're leaving out the men. The conversation or what has gone wrong is because of these gender relations that we have. So one gender sees itself to be more superior than the other gender, and the other gender is regarded as inferior. So you cannot work on one part and leave out the other parts. Work done will be as good as zero. So the conversation, rather, the environment should be made favorable both by the men and the women. And it won't make sense to want to work on women alone, and yet when they go back home, they are going back to a household that has males in each, and the conversation didn't happen between males and the females. And so work done, yeah, will be as good as zero. So the environment should be made favorable by both the men and the women.
Okay. I've just opened a comment from Loretta. She's doing a correction. Like I said, I deliberately misquoted her. So she said, no, she didn't say women shouldn't feel entitled to be protected. Rather, they shouldn't feel entitled to lead. They should demonstrate that they are capable of leading. Women representation shouldn't just be premised on the fact that women are women. Um, just to give a small guide, I would love people to understand that the conversation is more about how does the environment become favorable for women. We are looking at the current environment, that is the current governance environment, and how convenient is it for women and young people, and not just representation. But Natasha, you can react to that after we've been guided.
So she says she meant to say, I meant they shouldn't feel entitled to lead. The conversation really is not about women feeling entitled to lead. I will not feel entitled to lead because I am a woman. No, the conversation comes from the only way we're going to achieve sustainable development is by having an active participation of everyone, regardless of whether they're male or they're female. And so this is where the entitlement comes in because half the population is women and half the population is male.
Is not.
Half the problems
Mm.
are faced by women, half the problems are faced by men. And so half the solutions are definitely going to come from the females and half the solutions are going to come from the men. And so we're not saying because we are female, we're feeling entitled to be leaders. No, we're saying we can equally lead just as good as the men. And it's not a competition of saying the women will lead better than the men. Really, it's just an issue of perspective. A woman is going to bring in a different perspective from that of a man. And so we're not saying we're feeling entitled to lead because we're females. No, that's not what we're trying to say.
Okay, so please don't forget, we are still having a conversation about the current environment and how inclusive or how accommodating is it for women and youth. I think not forgetting the youth, Natasha. We have really covered the conversation about women. We know that youths cover the majority portion in our population, and that is the same case with women. At the same time, we see that the youths are the biggest weapon that has been used to destabilize the environment to the extent where even themselves and the women cannot be supported. This has been a very deep cut, and from the looks of things, it doesn't look any better. In fact, it looks worse. What then becomes of our political and governance environment?
Your line is really bad. You were cutting all throughout the question. Could you kindly
Okay,
repeat and make it shorter? Maybe then you won't cut much. So I heard you're talking about the youths and the women, but I couldn't quite get the question.
okay. So I'm saying, as we are looking at women and youths, the youths in particular form the largest portion of our population. And at the same time, they have been the biggest weapon that has been used to destabilize our governance environment to become so unfavorable that we are still seeing worse cases and worse off, making the environment so unfavorable that women also are shunning away from participating in governance issues. How then do we get to deal with that? Because it seems to be a knife cut really deep.
So the issue of the youths being used to destabilize the environment, that in turn also makes women shun away because the environment is unfavorable, is anyway, the situation is quite sad. Like you had said, they use the youths to destabilize the environment. And so the few youths that are used to destabilize the environment are given a little something, or they are promised a little something to be given to them. And we're living in a situation where people are living in absolute poverty. And so, trust me, when you're given a little 300, a little 200, or a 500 to go and create chaos, if you are hungry, you will go and create that chaos. And so now it brings in the conversation of, are people aware that the environment is made bad for them to live in? And then after it's made bad for them to live in, they're then given they dangle a carrot in front of you to say, I'm going to give you this money. Can you go and create that chaos? And so now people need to become aware that this is what's actually happening. So they are worsening our environment. They are making the situation so bad. We're living in absolute poverty, and these are the same people that are coming and promising us a little 300, a little 500 to go and create chaos. So then maybe the young people should realize and say, okay, this money that you are giving me to go and create chaos, why won't you give it to me then to empower me to be able to start up something that's going to be able to better my life? So it's an issue of young people realizing to say they are being used as as tools of violence. But if they do not realize, then we will keep on going round and round in circles with the conversation.
Okay. Um, there's an interesting comment I've put up from King Angie. I love this comment. So she says a revolution can only take place when people are ready, and that's the case of Rwanda. If Zambia is ready, women will be there too. Natasha, I want to hear your comment on this. Is it that we are not ready? Are we getting ready? Is there a time when people should be ready?
I want to agree with her in part. So the revolution is only going to take place, yes, when people are ready for change. If people do not see the need for change, well, change will not take place. But then again, here's what's happening. People do want this change, but then the environment does not allow for this change to happen. And people are not brave enough to be able to facilitate for this change. Take it for example, I want to, like you had mentioned, Charmaine. So she wants to participate in elections and contest as a member of parliament for, is it Chilanga? But
Mhm.
then she was beaten up right at her house. And so the next woman that also might have wanted to contest in the forthcoming elections will say, no, I do not want to be beaten up at my house where I should be seeking protection. So I will not take part in this election. And so, really, change does want to happen, but the environment does not allow for this change to happen. And so I agree with her in that, yes, the revolution will happen when people are ready. But right now, people are ready, and the revolution is not taking place because the environment does not allow.
So, in other words, we're not ready. And the readiness will only come if people begin to be deliberate about their actions and creating an environment that looks ready for this, right?
But there's a ditch right in front of us that when we say set, go and start running, we'll fall in the ditch. So we need to cover up the ditch
Mm.
before we fall in it, not be able to come out.
I see. Okay, Natasha, we have about 30 minutes before we come to the end of the program. But I want you to make a reaction to this question. Um, Very interesting question from Mimi. And she says, uh, it's not always that we should critique. Sometimes it just shows that you are actually not paying attention. Are we not paying attention to the environment, Natasha?
I do not quite understand the question. It's not always that we should critique. Critique what? What are we critiquing?
Let's say
Sometimes
when we
we just,
school her and we are talking about the environment, we are criticizing about how bad the environment is, yet it's favorable. Let's say when we scored her.
I do not like this business of you asking us to mistake people. We're not just criticizing that the environment is bad. I mean, the numbers are there to show it. There's less women participating in governance issues. I mean, we have less than 16% of women in parliament, or is it now 12 after the death had happened? And we have less women in other places of authority. So how are we just criticizing? We are not paying attention to the environment, or we're not paying attention to the environment. Then what does the environment demand of us? Really, I do not quite get her question. I wish she could come up and comment again and make it more clear.
No, I'll be waiting her to do a correction if she's still here with us. Um, In the last 10 minutes, Natasha, we are heading towards the general elections, and we can see that the environment is going to continue to get worse, at least from what we can see so far. I would love you to give a prediction of how we are going to see the environment in the coming 4 months. Next month, we are not so far away from the dissolving of parliament, and it means a lot of powers will fall off and people will begin their journey into campaigns way up to August 12th. And this is the period when usually, at least from what we've recorded so far, we've seen that it's during these times that the environment even becomes more unstable. What are we predicting? Looking at the issues where we've seen the president coming out and making a commitment that they will make sure that there is no such things towards the elections. We've seen statements from the Minister of Home Affairs saying that they will ensure that we have a peaceful and fair elections. And I know that all those contributes to how an environment is going to be like. Um, Today is the 28th of April, 2021, and the environment is still unfavorable. What is your prediction in the coming days?
So I'm going to make a prediction first, starting with women's participation in the forthcoming elections. So I don't think there's ever been an election where women are coming out more and more in numbers to try and participate in elections, and regardless of whether they're old and young, quite a number of women turn up and say they were handing in their adoption papers, and there are some that are saying they're going to contest as independent candidates. Then we have some that were not adopted and we're crying on social media saying I haven't been adopted, but I'm still going to participate. So there's quite a number of women that are going to participate in the forthcoming elections. That's my prediction. Even though some of them may not be adopted. And then my prediction of the election environment, whether it's going to be full of violence or not. I mean, I want to use the present to judge what is going to happen in the 4 months to come. So my prediction is that there's still going to be a lot of violence that's going to characterize the forthcoming elections. And it's one thing to make claims and say they are going to ensure that there's going to be peace and security during the elections, and one thing to see them as well act in the current times. So right now we have groupings and gatherings um, that involve different political parties, and we see how chaos happens, and state machinery is not actually used to protect everybody that's in that place. So I'm hoping not to mention any political parties' names, but the state, the police usually are protecting named political parties when chaos erupts. And we see that there are actually videos going around, or there were videos going around at some point where there's a named political party and it's cadres that are throwing stones at another political party. And the police are there and they're seeing it happening, and they're not doing anything at all to protect the other party that's being stoned in that moment. And so it's one thing to say that they're going to ensure that there's peace and protection during the elections, and one thing to actually protect the people. So I would judge from now to say they are not doing anything right now. I don't think they're going to do anything in 4 months to come.
Okay, you've mentioned something very interesting that we cannot run away from, and that is political parties. The fact that you had to echo it out to say that currently there's an allege that we've seen more of state security being given to particular political parties. Is it fair to say that, in fact, maybe even just even the political parties themselves maybe are not putting in enough effort to fight an environment that is not conducive? Or can we say we are just not serious as a country?
Well, it's there is no way under the sun we are going to expect a political party that is not in government or not ruling to fight against state machinery. There's only so much they can do to, come up and speak out. It's more than just a named political party coming out and saying this is happening, we are going to fight against it. I mean, they are fighting against state machinery. It's impossible for them to win. And so
Mm,
yeah, the named political parties cannot do it in their own capacity or powers to fight whatever is going on right now. And so no.
yeah. Okay. Maybe just to also maybe just sort of get back a little. Um, we know that women are coming out in large numbers this year, like you have guided us. And at the same time, it's going to be a high year of probably the worst and most unfavorable year of unfavorable environment to ever exist in the history of our elections from the time we started our multi-party systems. Um, can we be able to see that women, even if they come from different political parties, be able to protect each other and ensure that they are creating an enabling environment for other women to participate? And it's not only the issue of them coming from different political parties, but we also have women that will be standing on an independent ticket. Uh, are we? Can we be optimistic about that?
So I think this year, I don't know if it happened as well in the 2016 elections, but there's been a number of organizations like the Young Women's Lobby and NGOCC that have been having workshops that involve different women from different political parties coming together and having discussions and finding solutions to their problems. And so, to the problems that the women face. And so, do I see women coming out and supporting each other? I think so. I see that happening. I've listened to quite a number of of radio programs where females from one political party come up and speak against a bad incident that had happened to another female that belongs to a different political party. And so, yeah, I do feel women will eventually, though right now it's not yet concrete, but eventually come 12th August or close to the elections, women will be out there to support each other and protect each other during the elections. I want to believe so. I do not want to take a negative opinion about that.
Okay, so I asked this question deliberately, and I'm picking it from an interesting interview that Hot FM had in the Women's Month. And in one of the interviews where Mumbi and that is the Vice Secretary General of the PF, as well as Madame Imenda and Comrade Rail both appeared. And within their discussion, even if it was meant for women, we saw that when trying to address the issue of violence and other factors that that include on the list of those that make the environment not favorable, I saw that even the women themselves did to some extent dwell on the safety being with the political parties. I saw that it was quite difficult for them to have a conversation as well, and without each of them accusing the other. Even when examples of certain women were given of them being harassed, earlier we even gave examples of Lady Shameo and Iris. I could see that even for them, it was very difficult for them to have a neutral conversation without proving that political parties would probably be the most safest way, or uh, are the ones who are making it possible that we have such an environment, whether good or bad. Can we say political parties are able to create this environment?
Are political parties able to create an environment that's unfavorable for women to participate in? Is that your question?
Either way, can we say they are the reason why we're having an unfavorable environment, especially for women? If yes, I would love to know how. And if no, then we go with it. I would still want to hear how.
Well, my answer is political parties are only part of the problem, really. They are not the reason why this environment is unfavorable. However, political parties can contribute in making this environment favorable. Like I had mentioned earlier on in the discussion, this problem starts from a domestic level, from a household level. For as long as we don't deal with it there, it's going to keep it's going to replicate in other forms, be society level, be at national level. So political parties are not at all in charge of perpetuating the bad environment, but rather are part of the problem. And yeah, political parties can be used to better the environment. And so, like you had mentioned, to say there was a discussion on Hot FM where we had different women from political parties, although they were each playing the blame game. I think in that moment, what should have happened is that they should have then, looked at the individuals before the political parties. Away from protecting your political party, look at the problem that's being faced and try and sort it out. And so, yeah, political parties can help to sort out the problem. Not that they create the problem; they are only part of the problem.
Okay. For our last question, Natasha, I'll ask you a very provocative question that has to do with the environment. We have had a lot of comments that come from people. Women are not the only victims. Even men are the victims of this environment. So they shouldn't throw us the pity party. How do we then deal with it?
We are not saying women are the only victims, no, but
Mhm.
women are the bigger victims. Women and the youth suffer the most uh, when it comes to this environment. And so this environment is mainly perpetuated by the men themselves. So we cannot say they are victims of an environment that they created themselves. So men are victims to an extent, yes, when it comes to certain problems, but really you cannot compare the problems that men and women face to be the same. No, I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation in the first place.
Okay, Natasha. Well, unfortunately, we have to come to the end of the program. I wish the conversation could go on and on and on and on. There are a lot of things that we still have to look at as far as the environment of governance. What would be your last remarks? Please put into focus that we are 4 months away from our elections. What would be your last remarks concerning the environment and generally the environment? Just that.
And so I will repeat what I had said earlier. The environment is not going to get better overnight. It's something that's going to take a few more years to happen. And the change is supposed to start at household level. We should change how we view women at household level, and the gender relations that we have at household level is what then is going to guide or change perspective at society level as well as national level. Also, we need to put in place policies and laws that are able to protect women and create a favorable environment for women to participate in governance issues, and not only put these laws and policies there, but find better ways to implement these policies and laws. Also, we need to educate the girl child. When the girl child is educated, she exposes herself to opportunities and be able to compete with the men as well. And so, yeah, those are my last remarks.
Okay, Natasha. Thank you for joining us. Unfortunately, we couldn't get hold of Comrade Christine. She had network challenges. And so we'll see how we can get her to join us in the next conversation. You joined in on the platform, a program brought to you by PAGS and OSISA to discuss about the various topics that have to affect our country and how women get involved. It's good night for tonight. See you again next week at same time, same place. Good evening. Mhm.